Hi folks, my name is Ted DiNola and I'm a developer relations engineer at Meta. My team provides deep dive technical and design feedback to developers like you as they create incredible experiences for MetaQuest. One of the most common pieces of feedback I give to developers is to be more generous with their interactions. Now, what is interaction generosity? It's my terminology for a concept that's been around in interactive media for decades. How do we reconcile the delta between what a user wants to do, their intent, with the inputs they're providing to the game or application? Now, here's an example anyone who's played a traditional platformer will be familiar with. The player wants to cross a wide gap. Due to a combination of factors, from hardware latency to psychology to physiology, this can be a difficult thing to pull off. With a simple change, in this case, providing a small amount of buffer time during which the jump input is still accepted, the task becomes much easier. We're able to better respect the intent of the player. And even though they might not have machine-perfect mastery of the controls, they're able to clear the obstacle. Success! Studios coming from traditional PC, console, or even mobile environments are often used to working with interaction platforms that support discrete interactions, high levels of precision, and full visibility of the interface. Building for AR and VR adds many additional considerations. Positions move from 2D points to 3D ones, orientation and rotation need to be taken into account, and interactive elements can be placed around the player at any location, meaning there are situations where they may be trying to interact with something outside of their field of view. If most of your interactions occur far apart from each other, the first step you can take to help increase interaction generosity is simply increasing the area a user's interaction can occur in. This is especially important for objects a user may not be looking directly at when they try to interact. Have a belt-mounted tool on the user's left side. Don't ignore any interactions just because their hand isn't actually touching it. If their arm is down and a grab input is detected, just let them have it. In some cases, this type of interaction can be purely directional. If the object is in a 3D space, particularly if it's not anchored to the player, increasing the range of the trigger volume for an object being selected for interaction can achieve the same effect. Note that while this can also work well for distance-based interactions, if you have a discrete interaction visual like a laser beam for a pointer, you'll want to keep volumes tight, as users will have increased precision. However, if you allow for a flexible selection of distance, it can have the same benefit as near-field interactions. Your interactions should help reinforce the pillars of your game. Pistol Whip is built around feeling like an action movie star, and precise shooting is less important than being aware of where enemies are. And its shooting system is very generous. Similarly, while movement is a core part of the experience, the game respects what the player can see. Collisions are very forgiving once the front of a player's head has cleared an obstacle's forward edge, because otherwise players found themselves taking damage for no reason. Now let's introduce some more density to your experience. Assume you have several objects, either in the near field or at a distance that your user might want to interact with, which are all relatively close together. It's important to make sure that a user doesn't accidentally move off their intended selection. To accomplish this, you can give more weight to the interaction volume or an angle band for directional selection that a user is currently in, until they are clearly selecting the neighboring object. That object becomes the new selected one and is weighted more strongly against any other interaction volumes. By only switching when it's very clear a user is trying to interact with a different object, the interaction will stick to the last one the user moved to. For additional polish, you can also trigger a change based on the movement delta of the user's controller or hand. If an object is selected and the delta seems small, stay in the selected object. See a big delta? That's probably the user trying to select something else, and you can reduce the amount of additional weight applied. We can take this design philosophy even further by trying to predict what the user is trying to do, for which we can rely on game state. Is the user low on health or ammunition? Did the user just complete an area? Is there a time-sensitive action they're expected to perform? Using your current game state, you can make informed decisions about what action a user is trying to perform and give that additional weight. Similarly, we can use variables to track what information the user has discovered. Imagine you have a puzzle game where the user needs to enter a passcode into a realistic number pad. The numbers are all spaced closer together, so the stickiness described above can be used to make it easier to go between each one. Before the player knows the right code, there's no way to tell what button they're trying to press, so factoring for intent isn't as important. Later, we know the player looked at the code, scrawled on a chalkboard or on a piece of paper they found in a desk drawer. They returned to the keypad to enter it, Since we know they saw the code, we can give additional weight to buttons in its sequence. After the first button is pressed, we can increase the weight in the second, then the third, and so on until the sequence is completed. Let's imagine we have a first-person shooter with immersive interactions. Inventory is managed physically, and weapons need to be reloaded and readied manually. Next, let's break down player interaction attempts and their outcomes without and with generosity, applied over a 2-second fire and reload sequence. Without generosity, this common fire and reload sequence can be difficult and frustrating for a player, especially if they are in the middle of intense sections that can lead to failure. But with generosity, the player is more successful in executing this routine fire and reload sequence over and over and can focus their attention on the incoming targets. 1. The player needs to aim and fire the gun. Now, without generosity on their hand transforms, if their hands are in the wrong position or orientation for the gun, their aim could be very tricky. Or in some implementations, the leading or trailing hand could detach from the weapon. By using the vector between the two hands as your aim vector, aligning the gun between them appropriately, and by allowing tolerance on hand distance and rotation with respect to your player's intent to hold the weapon. If the trailing hand is out of alignment and the trigger is pulled, the gun can still be fired with confidence in the player's intended action. Number 2, the player needs to expend the spent casing from the chamber by lowering and pulling back the bolt lever, and they need to do it quickly. Without tolerances around the handle's grab volume and around the bolt's travel distance, they are likely to fail by either missing the handle, not lowering it fully, or not fully pulling back the bolt. For such a rapid action, if the grab is close enough and they roughly lower and pull back their hand, we can compensate and complete the action for them. More weight here can be assigned to the bolt handle to avoid the player accidentally grabbing the rifle itself or any other controls on its surface. Number 3, the player needs to grab ammunition. They reach down towards their right waist to grab some, but their hand is actually a little bit closer to a flashlight. By default, they would grab the flashlight at a bad time. Not super useful. Since we know the chamber is spent and they aren't looking towards their waist, we can be generous by putting more weight on the ammunition interaction volume so they can successfully grab a fresh round. Number 4, to reload the gun, they bring the round up to the chamber and release. Without tolerance here, if the bullet is in the wrong orientation or not properly positioned, it could fall to the floor. As long as the bullet is close enough, we can compensate for facing position offset, properly placing the round in the chamber. Finally, they go to push the bolt forward and lock it to ready the weapon. To do this, they grab the handle, move their hand forward and up, and release to grab the trigger. Just as in the ejection step, we can be generous here around the grab and the motion, so the player doesn't fall just short of properly readying the weapon. Now, there are lots of ways this series of interactions can fail. The weapon may be difficult to aim or may fall out of the hands, the chamber may not properly eject the round, ammunition may not be grabbed or may not be loaded, and the weapon may not be readied for firing, despite the player feeling like they've done everything correctly. By being generous with the various steps involved, players are much more likely to accomplish the intended action and avoid frustration with the experience. Now, there can be cases where being strict about an interaction can strengthen your experience or mechanic. If precision is a key pillar of your experience, players come into it expecting to need significant coordination and accuracy. If a particular action is detrimental, such as a spaceship self-destruct button or a UI element that ends the session, lowering the weights on them can help prevent accidents. Use your best judgment, and remember that any interaction generosity can be tuned to what makes sense for your experience. Make it optional. Especially in cases where having a range of interaction precision doesn't massively change the quality of the experience, allowing users to select the required precision can be valuable. This is especially true in skill-based experiences, where demanding better performance from the user can add to the challenge or immersive feel. By letting users select this on their first session, you can also self-select users who prefer more precision-demanding interactions and who will therefore be less likely to blame the experience on any failed actions they make. Keep in mind, however, that for multiplayer experiences, it's important to make sure different tolerances don't provide a competitive advantage to a subset of players, or clearly display a user setting for transparency to other participants. A traditional example of this can be seen in balancing games that support both controller and keyboard, using features such as aim assist and target stickiness. Don't go overboard. Making your interactions too tolerant can leave things feeling floaty or mushy, or introduce more unintended interactions. Set aside time to iterate on any dynamic weighting logic and to tune tolerances in a way that makes sense for your experience. When using any sort of interaction assistance, there's always the chance for a false positive. Remember to think holistically about what interactions a user needs to perform and when, and make sure to lay out interactive volumes accordingly. Now, no attempt at predicting player intent will ever be perfect, but with testing and tuning, you can significantly reduce the chance that a user will perform an unintended action. An additional step you can take when implementing generous interactions can be to support multiple interaction methodologies. For example, you could have a fully immersive mode with manual reloading and inventory management, while also providing a button-based mode following PC or console approaches, allowing people to choose what they're comfortable with on their first session and allowing them to switch it at any time. As a bonus, this approach can also help increase accessibility for users who have limited mobility or small play spaces or who are new to VR. Regardless of your application type, designing with generosity in mind can help significantly reduce frustration, perception that an interaction is broken, and the need to repeat attempts at performing an action. In experiences that demand the execution of a sequence of actions in a short time frame, failure to be generous can result in the perception that the experience is flawed, whereas allowing for some more imprecision can actually feel more precise. I always look forward to seeing how developers implement generous interaction design into their applications to help avoid player frustration and create more accessible and satisfying experiences. If you have any questions or want to share your own work, be sure to speak up on our developer forums.